The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are my favorite Cosmere books, mainly due to my fascination with the battleground between the Parshendi and the Alethi on the Shattered Plains. Reading about the Alethi war camps and plateau runs, I knew I wanted to create my own reference guide to the 10 different Alethi Highprince army colors. Once I got my hands on the STL files for the Alethi Spearmen, it was time to make this dream a reality. Stick around to the end, where I'll explain how you can vote on your favorite color scheme. Fortunately, I have a friend who recently acquired a 3D resin printer. Thanks to him, I was able to get 10 Alethi Spearmen on my table. Since these were hot off the resin press, I washed them off with soapy warm water. Luckily, I had been at the dentist a couple months before this project, so I had a brand new hobby toothbrush handy. Since my original plan was to paint the Highprince glyphs right onto the shields, I needed to get a smooth surface. So the colon glyph pair had to be removed, which I think Ash the Herald would approve of. I scraped off the protruding glyphs on the first variant and filled in the bevels with green stuff on the second variant. To add a touch more variety, I brought out my box of extra Warhammer bits. I looked for feathers, hand weapons, and pouches. I always find it interesting that model soldiers usually don't have pouches for their valuables. If I were in an Alethi army, I would be keeping my spheres with me at all times. After scrutinizing over the 11 pouches that I had, I chose 10 and glued them onto the model's hips and butts. After gluing each mini onto a 32mm base, it was time to prime them all black. A choice I will come to regret on the very last model. But before putting the brush to the minis, I needed to ensure my colors were as accurate as possible according to the lore from the books. Shout out to a couple of my subscribers for helping me out here, especially you, XY7596. You went above and beyond to research the colors and extra bits of Alethi lore. Thank you very much. If any of these color schemes seem off to you, give us your secrets in the comments. I completed the bases to match my current Shattered Plains color scheme, as I explained in my first painting tutorial video. Painting the bases first served as a motivator for me because I was no longer starting from square one with any of the minis. From here, I got excited and decided to try out a couple color schemes. Colon was an easy choice because I have already had practice with these colors. I took some extra liberties with the tunic edges and fancy striped pant legs. Hatham's mini of gold and red came next because this is very similar to the scheme I used with my entire Empire Warhammer army since I was 11 years old. With a couple of these test models underway, I moved back to the less exciting part of blocking in the skin tone, the wood areas, and the leather parts on every spearman. I then jumped back into Aladar's colors of black and maroon. I enjoyed this darker color scheme and painted his black a slight charcoal color to differentiate from his boots and belt. I tried a stripe on the shield, but wasn't sold on it. I'll come back to it later. I tackled the metallics next: breastplates, spear tips, shield edges, etc. Metallic parts can be a hassle to handle correctly. It didn't help that I ran out of lead belcher in the middle of this batch. Maybe one day I'll figure out non-metallic metal painting techniques, but today is not that day. Ruthar's colors are blue and red, which instantly made me think of the old Bretonnian men-at-arms kit I got when I was a kid. These guys had a split shield pattern, which I wanted to try. This eventually led to the whole uniform being split down the middle with blue and red. Is this too Bretonnian? Absolutely it is. Do I still think he looks great? Absolutely I do. Sebrial's colors are referenced as gold on black. For some reason, this reminded me of one of the Lords of the Realm 2's heraldry choices. I loved how this color scheme turned out, especially with mimicking what I learned from Ruthar's split shield. I started into Thanendal's red and brown scheme. I took inspiration from the redcoats from the Revolutionary War. I heard that they wore red coats so that troops wouldn't panic at the sight of blood on their comrades, and that brown pants were chosen to save the wearers from unintentional bowel movement embarrassment. Unfortunately for Thanendal's rank and file troops, they don't have pooper scoopers on retainer like Adolin does for his shard plate. My Sadia's model is a dark green with white highlights. I had painted a test model previously for Sadia's, but I think this second try turned out a lot better. It was encouraging to see progress in my painting only after a couple days of practice. Vama's brown and gray wasn't much of an inspirational color scheme, but I tried to make the most of it. Sometimes simpler neutral colors are a good refresher, but only sometimes. Needing to recover from Vama's dull colors, I came to Roion's gold and green. I wanted to differentiate his green from Sadia's, so I went with a light green base coat along with a nice golden yellow. I may have gotten carried away with his shield chevron, but I was feeling fancy because I typically don't paint such bright colors. Finally, I came to Bethab, and from our research, we found no color scheme to associate with this man. So I did what any of you would do in the situation and found inspiration from my 4-year-old's YMCA soccer jersey, which we had just gotten that morning, orange with white highlights. The only problem with orange is that my oranges did not perform well on a black primer. I'm sure there's some color theory behind this, but by the 3rd coat, I knew I was in trouble, but felt like I had come too far to turn back. I lost count around the 6th layer of orange. Needless to say, I learned my lesson here. But the pain paid off with a nice and bright, creamsicle-like Bethab soldier. Last of all came the glyphs on the shields. This was the step I was most excited about, and it definitely paid off. Thanks to my wife's friend, who's a crafter, we were able to print off stencils of the glyphs right from the Coppermind website. I then weeded and cut them out for the transfer process. My first attempt at these stencils failed miserably with colon, and I thought I was sunk. But thankfully, the rest of the stencils performed marvelously. I painted all the stencils white to give continuity between all the different color schemes. Between the glyphs and the Shattered Plains bases, I feel like these guys are from the same area of Roshar. After transferring the stencils, I had to do a little bit of edge cleaning up, mostly on colons, but it didn't take long to get the glyphs to show up nicely against the shields. This was one of the most satisfying painting sessions I have ever had. And they're done! Shortly after this video releases, I will be asking for your votes on my YouTube community page for which Alethi wore it best. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel to see these posts and cast your vote. If you're watching this after the polls have closed, don't worry. Let me know in the comments which Alethi Highprince color scheme do you like best and why. Until next time, keep painting.